Here you go, guys. You have The East is a podcast literally platforming a Zionist settler. So guess what, guys? I confronted him on this and I said, this guy's a Zionist settler. Quit platforming Zionists. And they said, oh, listen again. He moved and broke ties. And I said, he is still a Zionist settler. He is no different than Ilan Pappé. I'm part Palestinian, unlike you. Even if he ended ties with a Zionist entity, he still has blood on his hands. You're Iranian. I'm addressing Sina Rahmani. Iran does secret Zionist collaboration. And it's crazy. It's crazy because here's the thing. The East is a podcast literally just a little bit ago had the Good Shepherd Collective on. They had Bana Abu Zoluf and Cody O'Rourke from the Good Shepherd Collective on their channel. And you want to know what the Good Shepherd Collective says about liberal Zionist normalization? Let's take a listen.
Well, like there are very material ways that we can work and we can think strategically on a local level about what those are. And so I appreciate you all like kind of pointing that out and lifting that up. So you had this recent thread that I did want to bring you all on to also talk about, which was about Israeli allies and anti-occupation activists in Israel. And so I wanted you to kind of explain those dynamics a little bit, because I think in the United States, not only most people not have a great handle on nuances within Palestinian society, we also have very poor understanding of, I think, Israeli society. And I think there's even, I hear people say things of like, oh, well, a lot of Israelis oppose what's happening. And I'm like, no, like, as I understand it, the majority of Israelis actually think that Netanyahu, for instance, is not fighting this war harshly enough, right? That there needs to be an even harder line taken on Gaza. And so I think, that's obviously not the whole of society, but it does represent a large percentage of Israeli society. But you're speaking about some different segments, which are segments that might see themselves as so-called allies, which we have ally politics in the United States too, so people understand that concept, I think. And so yes, say a little bit about kind of what you were directly addressing, and also just help people understand a little bit about kind of who these people are, how significant are they within Israeli society as well?
Yeah, I wanted to say thanks so much for this question, Jared, because I think we can't say enough about it. I think it's really important, and I think we kind of started to get into it a little bit in the last interview, but I'm always happy to talk about it because it's such a prevalent problem. So just like first, because you brought up the bit about there's a large percentage of Israeli society that approves of what's going on or wants it to be even more aggressive. So I got some statistics up. There was a poll in January. At the time, the official number of martyrs that was being reported was 25,000. 88% of Jewish Israelis polled in January believe that the number of deaths is justified. And then in February, there was a poll by the Israel Democracy Institute in which 63% of the respondents opposed a proposal for the state to agree in principle to the establishment of an independent, demilitarized Palestinian state. So I'm not going to go into the, what even we could imagine would be an independent, demilitarized Palestinian state at this point, or what, Israelis might imagine that to be. But I think it's really important because I think there are folks that believe like, oh, Netanyahu is this fringe, violent, horrible person. And so are the people we named like Smotrich and Ben Gvir. And yeah, we can see how Israelis really think because they show us all the time. And I think they don't just show us all the time in these kinds of polls, right? I mean, one of the things that I think even for me and people around me that was surprising, maybe, is kind of realizing how deeply entrenched all Israelis are, in their connections to the genocide machine that's ongoing. Because even if you yourself, obviously not you, but even if an Israeli themselves is not, in Gaza or part of the machinery or in the military, everyone has a family member who is in the military, was in the military, they were in the military, or in another way in civil society, they're supporting what's happening. So even for the folks who we might consider like the fringe left, there are all of these structural connections and folks that are not going out of their way to distance themselves from that, to condemn that, to express, aggressively, or, I don't want to say aggressively, but to express very clearly their opposition to that, are not, are not opposed to it in practice. So I think that's just like important to say. But the threat itself was in response to.
So let's talk about the practices of, before we continue with this, about Dror Dayan's his practices. So this is from, ironically, this is 28 December 2016. Ironically, it's from another Zionist normalization outfit, the Electronic Intifada. And it talks about how Dror Dayan, who is a Zionist settler, even though he left occupied Palestine, he still whitewashes Zionist settlers. The film portrays how Palestinian villagers under occupation and how some liberal Zionist settlers support their cause and resistance. It shows how organized resistance works in Nabi Saleh. These settlers are liberal Zionist settlers. They are normalizers. They live on stolen Palestinian land. They benefit from resources stolen from Palestinians. Dror Dayan is a liberal Zionist. In the film, most of the protesters are from Nabi Saleh, but a few liberal Zionist settlers join the crowd. Dayan focuses on one of them, Ben Ronan, a Zionist settler who has dedicated his activism to Palestinian resistance, all while living on stolen Palestinian land. As a Zionist settler, he is aware of his privileged role in the conflict. Again, he is a Zionist settler. Dayan is not anti-Zionist. He is a liberal Zionist settler. And even though he moved to Germany, he is still a liberal Zionist settler. So he was called up for IOF participation and collaboration. He is still a Zionist settler. Let's continue.
To a post, a really long post by an Israeli journalist who's reached some prominence before October 7th, but especially in the last few months, about, it was on I think it was on the 7th, and so they were reflecting on what's happened since then, and started off by making it about themselves and the people they knew who had been personally affected and condemning Palestinian armed resistance. And we're 6 months into a genocide. I think the number is 34,000 Palestinian martyrs at this point. That's confirmed. We know thousands more that just haven't made it to a hospital. Bodies haven't been discovered. I think a lot of people were really upset by the framing to begin with, but also this equation of Palestinian resistance and Israeli genocide was just really jarring. And so sort of the background behind that is that there's this idea that there are Israeli leftists or Israeli non-Zionists or anti-occupation activists or whatever. And it's not just here, but because you said a lot of folks aren't familiar with the context, I think it's important to talk about here. And it's also not just Israelis. I mean, we're using the term Israeli loosely because it includes Americans and, other Westerners, mostly Americans, Canadians, people from the UK, Australia.
And what was the role of Dror Dayan? The role of Dror Dayan was to whitewash these liberal Zionist settlers. It says the film portrays the lives of Palestinian villagers under occupation. Now, some liberal Zionist settlers support their cause in resistance. Literally, Dror Dayan is whitewashing liberal Zionist settlers whose entire lives are built on stolen Palestinian land and Palestinian genocide and settler colonialism in Palestine. Dror Dayan literally whitewashes the role of settler colonialism in his film.
Who come here and take citizenship, right? Like yesterday, and now they're Israelis today. That are part of this mechanism of peace building and solidarity and co-resistance on the ground. And in principle, they might provide some material value, right? In terms of journalism.
So notice how they said peace building, solidarity, co-resistance on the ground. That's literally what Dror Dayan is promoting in his film.
About villages that are going to be displaced or are displaced, about settler violence. Of course, they always differentiate between what is settler violence in the West Bank and themselves, who reside in stolen Palestinian homes in Haifa, in Tel Aviv, in Jerusalem. And so they create this binary of good Israeli, bad Israeli, which we talked about in that Ebb article. That I can be a settler and at the same time be on the side of Palestinians and not address any of the material resources that I'm personally benefiting from through theft, that my family's been benefiting from through violence. And there are a number of organizations, so just to name some of these organizations, there are organizations on the ground like the Center for Jewish Nonviolence, Achvat Amim, but there are other normalization organizations that benefit from these interactions, like Combatants for Peace, Seeds of Peace. I'm trying to think if there are any others that I really want to name at this moment. I'm sure they'll come to me. But so, there's a whole funding scheme around these folks, and they're always engaged in normalization, and they're always peace now. Thank you, Vanna. Peace now. And they're and they're always engaged in this funding scheme where they have to have Palestinians, right? Because they're peace organizations, so they have to have Palestinians. They find vulnerable Palestinians who they can, who are willing to say things for protection, for funding, for all of these different material resources. And then they get to, come online and have clout or, publish articles, and they build their brand off of these connections. A lot of these journalists who benefit from this role as Israeli leftist or whatever, and get to travel and get to make a lot of money and get to make documentaries and get to, have their name.
Talk about making documentaries. This man, Dror Dayan, literally made a documentary about Zionist settlers in Palestine and whitewashes the record of Zionist settlers and the material reality that these Zionist settlers live on stolen Palestinian land and they benefit from their status as settlers, their family ties to the IOF, and I'm sure Dror Dayan has family ties to the IOF. And the fact of the matter is, Dror Dayan himself is a Zionist settler. And notice how he talks about a one-state solution instead of full Palestinian liberation from the river to the sea. This is who Dror Dayan is. Dror Dayan is a Zionist settler. And it's crazy that, about 3 weeks after inviting on, 6 weeks? Because that was 11/30/2024. 6 weeks after inviting the Good Shepherd Collective's Banu Abu Zolof on his show, Sina Rahmani turns around and platforms a literal Zionist settler. And Sina Rahmani is Iranian, by the way. He's not even Palestinian. But you know who's Palestinian? I'm Palestinian. Matter of fact, 7% of my ancestry is Palestinian. I'm literally descended from Druze in Palestine and from Melkite Catholics in occupied 1948 Palestine, as well as from Lebanese Druze, Lebanese Melkite Catholics, and Lebanese Shia Muslims. That's literally what I'm descended from, son. I'm 8% Lebanese and 7% Palestinian. I'm indigenous to Palestine. Sina Rahmani's from Iran. Iranians will sell you out in a jiffy if you're Palestinian.
In fancy magazines and newspapers, they're only able to do that because they are associated with Palestinians, right? And so they create this career very much off of the back of Palestinians, off of the violence that's imposed upon us. While, it's not just that they're not personally targets of this violence on the structural level, but they are actually receiving privileges from this violence as settlers, right? And so they build these careers, and then they build this clout, and then they go on to say things like this. And it's not just this journalist, I'll just say his name, Yuval Abraham, who made this tweet, but it's a number of people, and it's not just Israelis, because other organizations in the United States and the UK, for example, if not now, Breaking the Silence is another good one, Na'amod in the UK, they use these same figures as redemptive Israeli leftists or whatever.
And it's not just the East is a podcast doing this. It's also the Electronic Intifada. Let's check it out. It's not just the East is a podcast doing this. It's the Electronic Intifada. They literally promote Zionist settler and platform Zionist settler from Canada, David Sheen. They literally promote and platform Zionist settler Shiv Hever. It's not just the East is a podcast doing this. Katie Halper's doing this. India and the Global Grift is doing this. Brianna Joy Gray is doing this. I want to try to see where this is. David Sheen, liberal Zionist settler from Canada, being promoted by the Electronic Intifada. They also promoted Ilan Pape. David Sheen, again, Zionist settler from Canada, living in stolen Palestinian land. Shiv Hever, Zionist settler, the manager of a Zionist normalization organization. And this is on the supposedly left-wing Electronic Intifada. Again, my family's literally from occupied 1948 Palestine. China Bender Mateo Capasso, Zionist grifter John Mearsheimer. I want to see where they have Ilan Pape on here. Max Blumenthal, who's friends with Zionist Tucker Carlson. This is on fucking live streams there. Deep Dive Palestine's another organization that is a Zionist normalization organization that platforms science. Oh, Elon Pape, you're literally platforming someone who is in the IOF. That's Elon Pape, who is a Zionist terrorist.
And like place their voices, their narrative on the same level with Palestinians, even though Palestinians are the colonized party, the oppressed party, the party that is seeking liberation. So it's really very upsetting, not only because it's built off of this violence of like stealing wealth, stealing privileges, stealing resources, but it also is maintaining this theft because they personally become wealthy and voices that are privileged and that get to then, in the case of Yuval, condemn Palestinian resistance, right? Now, yeah, I think I'll end it there because I just want to emphasize that this violence is not just on the level of really building careers, cultivating resources, cultivating a name for yourself, really becoming a person with material wealth off of this violence, but that then that is used to delegitimize, to destroy, to tear down Palestinian meaningful engagement towards decolonization.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll add just something really quick. Just on the epistemic or like the narrative thing of like using the token Palestinian. I thought that was quite interesting. What you said is that a lot of the times, you know, you have these sort of, you know, Palestinians that kind of function as tokens in those spaces. They're just used by institutions, whether Israeli institutions or Western institutions, to sort of solidify an idea, usually an idea that is, you know, anti-Palestinian. And there's a really good piece by Ramzi Baroud who talks about this idea of, you know, two types of Palestinians that, you know, that are asked to, you know, by media sources or just asked to speak on Palestine. And usually it's the, you know, status quo Palestinian and the adversarial Palestinian. So the status quo Palestinian would be mainly the, you know, the Palestinian that would be like supportive, you know, or backed by the Palestinian Authority, would somehow, you know, belong to, you know, a Washington think tank and some other, you know, U.S. think tank, and would have the moderate line on, you know, Palestine. You know, Palestinians are, you know, suffering so much, but that's it. But, you know, I believe in equality, and, you know, this is apartheid, so we need equality and whatnot. And then you have the other Palestinian, the adversarial one, who ultimately has really antagonistic views, or like framed as having like really antagonistic views, really like strong, you know, kind of radical, kind of non-moderate views. And then obviously they're being, you know, they get asked to, you know, come in and talk about Palestine, to be really, you know, shunned by the media, to be, you know, made to look like the dogmatic, you know, other opinion, right? Because you want to sort of make the moderate line looks really like, you know, nice and polished, but you want to look, you know, to make the other person, adversarial Palestinian, look, you know, violent, and you know, make that look sort of unpleasant, that, you know, opinion or idea that they have, right? And so he writes, Ramzi, like Baroud writes that, you know, this is all made to really solidify and consolidate and legitimize the platform. The idea is not that they want to give Palestinians or those who have, you know, dissenting, you know, ideas a space to talk. It's really about basically legitimizing this idea of, we bring the space for the other debates, this, you know,
And again, that's why I'm making this video, to call out Sina Rahmani and Justin Padour. for platforming a literal Zionist settler. You dumbasses had Good Shepherd Collective on literally 6 weeks ago. Now you're platforming this Zionist terrorist, this Zionist normalizer, a man who literally makes videos whitewashing Zionist settlers and their role in settler colonialism. It doesn't matter if he lives in Germany. It doesn't matter if he identifies as anti-Zionist. Look at his actions, dickhead. This man is a settler. This man has made a career on himself of making films to whitewash Zionist settlers under the guise of co-resistance. Again, let's check the facts, Sina. I'm part Palestinian. 7% of my ancestry is from the Druze community in Daliat al-Carmel, as well as the Melkite community in Usfia, and the Melkite community in northern Palestine in general, in occupied 1948 Palestine in general. That's my literal ancestors. That's my literal family. I can even show you that I'm Palestinian and Lebanese. Maternal haplogroup, L1b. Unlike you, Sina, I'm native to Palestine. I'm indigenous to Palestine, just like I'm indigenous to Lebanon. Maternal haplogroup, motherfucker. L1b. So, unlike this Iranian grifter, I'm actually pro-Palestine because I'm indigenous to Palestine. Both my maternal grandparents have Palestinian ancestry. And my maternal grandma was Palestinian and Lebanese. What do you have to say for yourself, Sina? Normalizing this Zionist settler who makes propaganda films, platforming liberal Zionist settlers under the guise of co-resistance? These settlers materially benefit from genocide and settler colonialism. Dror Dayan is a Zionist propagandist. Dror Dayan was part of the IOF. Dror Dayan has all these structural ties to the Zionist entity and settler colonialism. Quit fucking platforming. He's made a career on being a filmmaker that whitewashes Zionist settlers under the guise of co-resistance.
Neoliberal idea of providing.
And you know who else? The left is the East is a podcast platforms. They platform liberal Zionist publication Mondoweiss. That's right. The same platform that normalizes Zionist propagandist, Zionist operative Mitchell Plitnick. The same platform that normalizes JVP operative, Zionist operative Alice Rothschild. Zionist grifter Michael Adia. The same platform that normalizes Zionist normalization group Zochrot. The same Zionist normalization platform that normalizes Zionist settler, Jonathan Ophir. Do we not see a pattern of behavior here? A pattern of behavior of opportunism by the East is a podcast? These are opportunists. And you want to know where Justin Padur, who also runs this, is from? So this is run by Sina Rahmani, who's Iranian, and Justin Padur, who is Indian. Do we not see the big Zionist grift here? Again, this man is a Zionist normalizer now. And you know who else platforms Dror Dayan? You know who platforms Dror Dayan? Left Voice. Left Voice literally lets Dror Dayan write articles in their publication. Left Voice is a liberal Zionist publication. Do you want to know who else writes in Left Voice? Liberal Zionist Nathaniel Flakin. So, you see, there's a pattern of Zionist normalization. And the crazy thing is that 6 weeks ago, this man, Sina Rahmani, had the Good Shepherd Collective on his platform to talk about settler colonialism. And now he's platforming a literal settler. So as somebody who is Palestinian, again, 7% of my ancestry is Palestinian. I'm 8% Lebanese. I'm 7% Palestinian. And my entire maternal lineage is Lebanese and Palestinian. Haplogroup L1b. My entire maternal lineage is from Balad Hashem. So as someone who is Palestinian as well as Lebanese, I'm going to have to denounce this guy. I'm going to have to expose this guy. Because guess what? This man literally platforms a Zionist propagandist who makes Zionist normalization videos under the guise of co-resistance and co-solidarity. This man doesn't even want to talk about decolonization. This man doesn't want to talk about from the river to the sea. This man doesn't want to acknowledge Palestinians from occupied 1948 Palestine, like myself. This man doesn't want to acknowledge Palestinians from the Haifa Governorate like myself. This man is a Zionist settler. This man is a Zionist normalizer. There are zero excuses for Zionist normalization. This man calls himself, Tanky Group Therapy, East is a podcast, yet he's willing to normalize a literal Zionist settler. So this man's fraudulent. This man's a liberal Zionist. And the East is a podcast has been outed as a liberal Zionist platform. So there you go.